Hello and welcome to The Signal, WorkplaceNL's health and safety podcast. WorkplaceNL is the Workers' Compensation Board in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. The focus is to promote safe and healthy workplaces, provide return-to-work programs, and offer compensation to injured workers and their dependents. This series of podcasts will provide you with the latest information on how workplaces can protect the health and safety of workers. Please enjoy the show.
Worker health and safety representatives and workplace health and safety designates play an important role in developing a positive safety culture in the workplace. Their responsibility is to consult with the employer and workers to monitor the health and safety of the workplace. They provide a critical communication link between workers and management in promoting occupational health and safety, participating in workplace inspections, providing advice to the employer on how to correct hazards, as well as an important role in resolving work refusals. My name is DeeAnne Feltham-Scott, Occupational Health and Safety Educational Consultant in Prevention Services. Today I'm joined by Kevin Fisher, Executive Director of the Newfoundland and Labrador Occupational Health and Safety Association, and Charmaine Bungay, Health and Safety Advisor in Prevention Services, to discuss this vital connection between employers and workers in creating and maintaining healthy and safe working conditions. Welcome, Kevin and Charmaine. Thank you so much for being a part of this episode today.
Thanks for having us, DeeAnne. We appreciate it.
Thank you, DeeAnne.
Let's begin with Kevin. Kevin, can you just tell us a little bit about the Newfoundland and Labrador Occupational Health and Safety Association, or NLOHSA, as we like to call it, who you are, what you do, and how you support occupational health and safety in the province?
I sure can. Before I start, though, on behalf of the Board of Directors, I would like to thank WorkplaceNL for inviting us to partake in this podcast today, because we are promoting health and safety, and we want to try to help out as much as we possibly can. So with respect to our organization, the Newfoundland Industrial Health and Safety Association was formed in St. John's on June the 11th, 1956. The founders were representative of organizations, largely business and industrial companies, operating within the province and paying assessments to the Workmen's Compensation Board, which is now called WorkplaceNL. Their focus was in reducing workplace accidents. We are now called NLOHSA, the Newfoundland and Labrador Occupational Health and Safety Association, and our mandate is to promote health and safety in all sectors within the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, mainly through our annual conference and trade show, which is held in Gander each and every May. Over the past several years, we have built partnerships with other associations and organizations to help further health and safety awareness in the province, such as WorkplaceNL and Municipalities NL.
Right. I didn't realize that the organization has been around really in some form since 1956.
Absolutely, and we're actually having our 68th annual conference in May of this year, 2025. So there was, I think, a few years where we didn't. The last one would have been 2020 for COVID. But yes, we're very excited. With that break at COVID, we're starting to rebuild our conference, and we're really looking forward to May 7th to 9th, 2025 again.
And it's bigger and better every year.
Absolutely.
You do a great job.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so Charmaine, let's move to you now, and let's really get into the roles and responsibilities of worker health and safety reps, or workplace health and safety designates. And we're going to kind of shorten that now today, because that is a mouthful. We're going to call them WHS reps and designates. So we do know, Charmaine, that the provincial occupational health and safety legislation changed in March of 2024. For committees as well as WHS reps and designates. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Certainly, DeeAnne. The Occupational Health and Safety Act was amended in March 2024, where there were new requirements introduced, and this meant that workplaces that required occupational health and safety programs and occupational health and safety committees in Newfoundland, Labrador, the threshold has changed. So what we've seen with these new requirements is that workplaces that originally had 10 or more workers were required to meet these requirements. Now what we see with the threshold change is 20 or more workers in a workplace, and now these requirements are there. So what we are seeing now is employers with less than 20 workers are now required to have a worker health and safety representative or a designate in their workplace. And the legislation then says they shall have an occupational health and safety policy along with these representatives or designates. Often what we've heard throughout the industry as being safety professionals is that this change has likely had workers to lose their voices, where there was no requirement for an occupational health and safety program in those smaller type of workplaces. But really what we have to remember is that every employer in this province has health and safety responsibilities to look after the health, safety, welfare of their workers. And if we were to look in the legislation in Section 5, it does outline all of those requirements. So every workplace should have education and training they're providing to their workers. They need to do workplace inspections, have safe working procedures for their workers, and this to be communicated with them. So really not a lot has changed for requirements of employers and what they need to do to keep their workers healthy and safe.
Absolutely. They're still participating in workplace inspections.
Most definitely.
With regards to incident investigations, if a worker health and safety rep or a designate is asked to participate in this investigation, they certainly can, as well as we can't forget their important role in work refusals. So like you were saying, things really haven't changed for them, right?
No. Employers should really be empowering and engaging their worker health and safety reps and designates in their workplace. These are the people who are speaking on behalf of the workers. Giving them time, supporting them in their roles are a critical component for keeping workers safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this episode today, of course, we know is focusing on the roles of the representative and the designate. So in a general sense, Kevin, what is their role?
Well, in a general sense, it's to monitor the health and safety of work conditions in the workplace in consultation with the employer, as we were just talking about in the last question. And the legislation gives representatives and designates the same duties as those imposed upon a committee where applicable. So I think another important note to add here, though, is that this does not mean that they are a safety officer. And I think that could be looked at in different lights. Say if you were, example, on a construction site or on a manufacturing floor or whatever. It's still the employer who has the responsibility to ensure compliance. And that's a very important point to remember. Many workplace health and safety reps think that this means that they now are responsible for everything safety related, which is not the case. They are merely a liaison between the employer and workers, ensuring that the workers have input in health and safety matters that affect them. And if I could just go back to one of the points that Charmaine had just made, I think that the culture needs to change a small bit with respect to the representatives, and it should fall to the hands of the employer. They should avail some, whether it's a weekly basis, a monthly basis, we'll leave that up to the individual employer. But I think it would be best recommended that the representative have time to actually go out and speak to people out on the floor. Because remember, they do still have a job to do besides being a health and safety rep. But if the employer would work with those individuals and give them the time on the floor or out in the yard or in the field, wherever it might be. But I think it would be very beneficial, and I think the relationship between the two would be much better as well.
Absolutely. OSH legislation tells us that employers have to have a representative or a designate. Is there a difference between the two? And under what conditions is the designate appointed? Charmaine, can you just give us some more information on what that difference is?
These representatives or designates, where at all possible, should be workers in the workplace. There is a slight difference when it comes to the particular connection within the workplace that they have. A representative would be a worker who are elected by their peers within their workplace. So the employer has to do everything that they reasonably can to ensure that a worker from the floor is selected. However, due to the uniqueness of different workplaces, we may see that change a little bit. So the difference in a designate role in a smaller type workplace, typically in legislation, it's less than 6 workers. You still have to try to get a worker where at all possible. But this worker may be connected with the management at the workplace. What I mean by that, it could be a family-owned business where the husband or the wife owns the business, and they may have their brothers or children working in the workplace. So those family members are still considered the workers of that employer, but they do have a relationship to the employer. When that is not practical, say in a high turnover type environment where the environment's changing quickly all the time, it may not be practical to have a worker. So in some cases, we may see that the employer is the designate for the workplace. But ideally, we would love to see that a worker from the floor is committed to health and safety.
There is a process, too, that's outlined in legislation for selecting the representative or the designate. What is that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So that process, there's really just 2 steps. And the first one, representatives are to be elected by other workers at the workplace or appointed in accordance with the constitution of the labor unit of which the workers are members. The second point, designates are appointed or can be appointed by the employer. One thing I would like to add to that, though, while a workplace with fewer than 20 workers does not need to establish a committee, there is absolutely nothing preventing them from doing so if they wish to formalize the process a little more. They just would not need to send minutes to WorkplaceNL, which a committee would have to do if you had more than 20 employees. Yeah. So again, it's something that I think everyone should be aware of, that just because the legislation changes, remember, there are minimum requirements. If you wanted to add something to it, by all means that you could.
I was just going to say that. We all have to remember that legislation is minimum requirements.
Yeah.
So if a committee is going to better serve the workplace and the workers, then there is nothing stopping an employer or a workplace from doing so.
No, and definitely would recommend doing that, because especially if you're used to doing that, or if you change jobs and go to another place that is not doing it, maybe you could make that recommendation. But at the end of the day, it's better to have a list of minutes there. They know what they need to work on. It's not word of mouth. It's actually, if it's documented, it'll get done.
Charmaine, are there any training requirements? I mean, I would imagine that anybody who would be serving as a representative or a designate in the workplace would have to be effectively trained. So what are the training requirements for them?
WorkplaceNL has developed a training program for reps and designates specifically. There is a little bit of a process around it. So we call it the Level 1 Occupational Health and Safety Committee, Worker Health and Safety Representative, and Workplace Health and Safety Designate Certification Training. So anyone being part of an Occupational Health and Safety Committee or being a rep or a designate in the workplace must complete Level 1 training. As outlined in the legislation, we talked about minimum guidelines. The employer is responsible to make sure that this training is provided for those individuals and that they pay for the training for those people to go and take it. It has to be done during regular working hours, and the employer has to grant commitment to the worker that they can go and participate. So you will see outlined within legislation that these groups take training as outlined by WorkplaceNL. So what we mean is taking the Level 1 certification training.
Right. And that training and the training provider and the trainer itself have all went through an approval process through WorkplaceNL as well.
Yes. And this doesn't limit representatives and designates to just this type of training. There are other things that they can do to help enhance their roles and responsibilities that they're going to be doing in the workplace. They should be knowledgeable about what their employers have, and the employer should be providing them with an orientation to what they have when it comes to health and safety policies, procedures, practices, those types of things. WorkplaceNL, we offer free online health and safety courses and webinars. Anyone can take those. And any way, I always look at it, any way that I can enhance my own learning with health and safety, and it's free, then I will take advantage of those things. We also at WorkplaceNL have resources dedicated to representatives and designates in workplaces around various health and safety topics. And there's things like Kevin introduced earlier with NLOHSA conference. People can go and take part in these types of activities where they can learn about health and safety from other health and safety professionals that are out there in industry and network with those people and make connections.
Exactly. And every industry in the province is represented at these conferences. Like, what a great opportunity to meet and network with other people. And just what a great way to increase your knowledge. Every year, there is such a great selection of speakers, so many different topics. I guess one of the main ways that you can really learn is learning from each other.
Yeah, no, that's a real good point, DeeAnne. And just to add on to it as well, we do have a certain amount of sessions each and every year. And where we do promote every sector in Newfoundland and Labrador, we can't hit on every one of them every year. But to that point, with our networking sessions, if you take one thing away from the conference and bring it back to your work site, whether it was through one of our sessions or whether it was through a conversation that you might have had at one of our networking sessions, then that's a win for us.
Absolutely.
And it's a win for the representative, or it's a win for the committee member or supervisor manager, whoever it might be. That is a win. And that's what we try to promote at our conference. So if you were going there to listen to something on psychological health and safety, and you had 3 or 4 things that you wanted to take back, later on that evening or that afternoon when we're having a coffee break or when we have our social in the evening, you might pick up on a couple of more things as well from people who are in different sectors than you are. Because just because you're in one sector doesn't mean that you have to stay in that sector. Someone might be in construction, but they could learn a lot of things from people in manufacturing.
Right.
And that's one of the good things that we enjoy about our conference each and every year.
As we were talking about earlier, I mean, the representative it's that one person now that's in the workplace, right? They don't have that committee of people around them. You know, what a great opportunity for representatives and designates to go out and to meet other people who are reps and designates as well.
And when they would have a question, they could reach out to these people that they make connections with. As you said, they're by themselves most of the time when they're on the work site or in the workplace. And if they could pick up their phone and call someone that they'd met and ask that question, it would be much better for them.
Absolutely. So if an employer has more than one work site, are they required to have a rep or designate for each one? Or can they just have one representative that is going to represent all of the work sites that they have?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because if you have 5 or 6 different work sites that might be small work sites, you would think that one representative might be able to take all of them on. But the short answer is yes, you are required to have a representative on each one of your sites. Representative or a designate. Charmaine had mentioned just earlier that sites have different potential hazards, and you might have 3 or 4 different work sites, and they all have different hazards. They're never the same. So to have one person going from one site to the next, you're really defeating the purpose of why they're actually there. So legislation does say that you do have to have them, and it is highly recommended by other associations, such as ours, such as NLOHSA, that you should have them.
That's a really good point. I never really thought about different work sites having different hazards. You can have a construction company, but you can also have different work sites that have completely different hazards. They could have a manufacturing side. Of course, they're going to have like an office.
Yeah, and it's good for the representative to be aware of that as well, because when you mentioned construction, like there could be civil construction, mechanical, electrical, all of those different things.
Completely different.
And if you've got 4 different sites, small sites that are in a different section of construction, then you must have a designate or representative on each one of those.
One other question for you, Kevin. We know that committees are required to meet on a regular basis. What about representatives? Are they required to meet with the employer?
Well, OH&S legislation does not require them to meet with the employer. However, best practice should be to follow the same requirements as set for an OH&S committee meetings, in that the representative or designate, if the designated is not the employer, would meet every 3 months to discuss OH&S on a regular basis. The employer is ultimately responsible to make sure that the workplace is healthy and safe and protect the well-being of workers. The Act holds them accountable to identify health and safety hazards, evaluate the risk of injury, and put measures in place to prevent injuries in consultation with the representative or the designate. And again, as we mentioned, having a formal process of regular meetings helps them meet that responsibility.
Absolutely. Establish more of a formal process where it just becomes a regular part of doing business in the workplace.
It also helps to demonstrate the employer's due diligence, that they are looking after the health and safety of those workers, and the representative to document those meetings and discussions that they're having.
So, Charmaine, what are some challenges that reps and designates might encounter? And what are some ways that you recommend that they could overcome these challenges?
I'm after seeing through my career lots of challenges experienced by representatives and designates within workplaces. And typically what we are seeing is in the smaller, and when I say smaller, usually 10 or less employees, that we see workplaces struggle with how they create health and safety practices and programming for their workplaces. Lots of times they don't have the expertise on staff. They don't have a health and safety professional that's there helping to guide health and safety within their workplace. But there are still lots of supports out there for those smaller workplaces as well. I find through my experience, reps and designates do know what hazards can hurt them. They know not to do particular things, but they struggle sometimes without that written guidance. How do I really perform my duties? Because nobody is really telling me how to get this done. Whereas when we have policies, procedures, it helps to guide that process. So again, any workplace should have written procedures for how to perform health and safety activities within their workplaces. But some of the things that I recommend representatives and designates do is what we already talked about, taking part in education and training initiatives around health and safety in the workplace. Again, lots of free things out there. It doesn't have to take a lot of money to do those. They could be done after hours as well, if that's the case. They want to learn a little bit more. But first and foremost, kind of be familiar with your workplace's policies, procedures, practices that you have. And if you don't have them, go ask the employer, work together to create these practices for the workplace, because ultimately it's about keeping workers safe, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, the rep and designate, we would like to see someone who has a passion for health and safety, not just to do it to get an hour off work or anything like that. We want to see people with interest in it and interest for keeping people safe. Having good communication skills, obviously, Kevin mentioned before, the liaison between the workers and the employer. They're representing both sides of the workplace. So it's for the common goal. Again, everyone goes home safe.
Absolutely.
Some other things that I recommend, maybe taking part in conflict resolution type training. You will sometimes have people that may be a little more challenging in the workplace, maybe not believe in health and safety and why we have to do these things. So sometimes having training or knowledge in those types of things will help within their role.
One other thing I guess that I would add with respect to the training, when Charmaine had said that, these individuals they haven't gone to school for health and safety. They don't have a CRSP or an NCSO or something like that. And in most places, risk assessments would be my number one thing.
Yeah.
Planned inspections. So if you have a new rep on site and they're not aware of all of the different parts of the site and what to look for, if you've got a documented inspection in your policies and procedures, then that's going to help your rep immensely. Risk assessments are a little bit different because you need to know how to pick out a risk or a potential hazard. But I would recommend that type of training as well.
Yeah.
It'll go a long way, for sure.
Risk assessments is definitely a daunting term.
100%.
But as Charmaine was saying, workers do know what the hazards are in their workplace, right? And even just as simple as asking them, the rep, the employer, asking the workers, what could hurt you? How much could it hurt you? What's the best thing that we can do to get rid of it?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, you would have to do the risk assessment in consultation with the worker. If a rep wanted to go out and do it by him or herself, then I don't think you're going to be successful in what you wanted to do.
That's right.
First and foremost, because the worker is the one who's actually performing the work. They've been doing it probably a lot longer than you have seen them watch do it. And they're the ones, if you would like to build engagement, I mean, that's what safety is about. It's about engaging people. And if you can engage people to help you do a risk assessment, and they can take ownership of it then. The representative is there, again, as I said, to be a liaison between the employer and the workers. Do that risk assessment jointly with the workers in the field, and you'll be pleasantly surprised at what comes out of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even going back to, one of the 3 rights of workers is the right to participate.
That's right.
So that is an excellent opportunity to get them involved and to get them participating in their own health and safety. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and having this discussion on the critical role that worker health and safety reps and designates play in workplaces all throughout Newfoundland and Labrador.
Great. Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, DeeAnne.
Thank you for joining us today. Transcripts are available to use in your workplace to increase workers' knowledge in various occupational health and safety topics. Visit WorkplaceNL.ca for more information on the services we provide to workplaces. Feel free to share the signal on social media to improve workplace health and safety everywhere. Thank you, and have a safe and healthy day.